today within some remit. Okay.
Tie him up, Dan.
I know, you will have to. I can put like a one of those bungee things on my back that will just like keep me in a certain distance of where I'm allowed to go and not allowed to go. I will do my very best. This will be tricky. Anyway, very nice to see you this morning. As Dan said, my name's Steve. I love coming and having an opportunity to share. I really do. It's a genuine joy to make a word from the song. I want to talk this morning a little bit about Jesus encountering a man called Nicodemus, and look a little bit about how that encounter happened, the kind of impact of that encounter, but actually more importantly, it's starting with this kind of point here. And I think Jesus, we understand, the Bible tells us that he is the perfect image of what God looks like. So he shows us more accurately and more precisely. He's the best view of what God looks like. So sometimes when we read bits in parts of the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, it can make it look like God is not interested in people, that God doesn't seem to like people all the time. And there's a load of different things around that. But actually, when we see Jesus, and he arrives on the scene, and he comes in to the kind of New Testament story, he comes in and lives on earth, we see this person who is the perfect image of God that seems to just love being around people and just love spending time with people. And that tells us that God, Jesus, loved being and meeting people. And we have a whole range of people through Jesus' time on earth that he met. And the range is to help us all see, as those who sit in this room this morning, as those who are watching on Facebook.
No, just on, it'll be Facebook later, YouTube later.
Facebook later, and YouTube. That actually it fits us as well. No matter who we think we are, no matter what we think about ourselves, Jesus met enough people where we fit into some of those categories. And it shows that he is interested in constantly meeting and encountering and engaging with us. And so I want to look at Nicodemus this morning, because Nicodemus is a fascinating character. And just go for the first little bit for me. So it says in John 3, where we kind of introduced Nicodemus, it says, "Now, there was a Pharisee, a man named Nicodemus, who was a member of the Jewish ruling council. He came to Jesus at night and said, 'Rabbi, we know that you're a teacher who has come from God, for no one could perform the signs you are doing if God were not with him.'" That's fun there. This is fascinating because we get introduced to Nicodemus as he's a Pharisee, so he has a high status in society just because he's a Pharisee. But not only is he a Pharisee, that he is part of the Jewish ruling council. So this guy has a kind of position and a status in society that people look at him. You might equate it to a politician or a high-profile leader, or we could even bring it into other categories like a celebrity. People that he would be known. People would know him. And like we have today, don't we, with all the wonders of social media, which we all love, or the normal news, that kind of stuff, we have an appetite for people being caught doing things they shouldn't do. And I'm sure none of us in this room want to have that, but that's how the media sells stuff. It goes, look at this person saying this, look at this person going here, this person doing here. They didn't have social media then. They didn't have that kind of stuff, but it still would have been like, what's Nicodemus doing? Why is Nicodemus going and speaking to Jesus? Why is he, this guy in this high profile position, who shouldn't really be agreeing with what Jesus is doing, why is he going and speaking to Nicodemus? And Nicodemus was aware of that, and that's why he came at night. Because he is aware, I shouldn't be, with my status, with my position, I shouldn't be coming and speaking to Jesus. So what I'm going to do it at night when no one can see me, when no one is aware of what I'm doing. Now, it may be just me, but if someone thought, well, I don't want to be seen with Steve, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it when no one sees me meeting with Steve, and I'm going to meet with Steve there. I'd be slightly offended. I'd be like, why? Why does no one want to kind of be seen with me? What's going on with that? And I think the reality is that didn't faze Jesus. Jesus wasn't put off by Nicodemus coming at night. He didn't say, actually, no, wait a minute, Nicodemus, if you're really bothered about meeting me, you can come in the daytime. He just met with him. And I think sometimes we think there's these kind of parameters where Jesus goes, actually, I'm not willing to meet with you at night, Nicodemus. I'm not willing to meet you in this context. But actually, Jesus is so desperate to meet with people that he meets with people where they're at. He meets with people in that moment. He met with Nicodemus in the dead of night. No one sees, because he wanted to meet with Nicodemus. And it mattered more that he met with Nicodemus than when he met with Nicodemus or where he met with him. He mattered more that he met with him. And I want us to just pause for a minute, just go on to the next slide for a minute. I think Nicodemus had a perception of himself as a position in society that was high profile, that meant that it affected how he approached Jesus. And there may be things that we think may be similar to Nicodemus or the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Maybe we don't think we are good enough. Maybe we think we're kind of have too much to lose, or whatever it may be, or there's things that disqualify us or don't allow us to come. But how could that affect the way we view ourselves? How could that affect how we approach Jesus? How could it affect how I come to meet with Jesus? Do I do it in a kind of, oh, I'm just not sure about this, or do I do it with a bit of kind of guilt and shame attached, or do I just not bother at all because I don't think I'm good enough to come and encounter and meet with Jesus? So the teacher in me always wants you to have an action. So I want you to take a minute. You can close your eyes if you want to, but I just want you to think about, you're not going to have to share this, but just think about those two questions and think about them honestly. Who do you see yourself as? What are the things that you see yourself that maybe they're good or not good, but the things that perhaps would affect how we approach Jesus? What is the baggage that might get in the way for us how we approach Jesus? So just a minute, just take a moment just to reflect on that. And I'm not going to ask you to share it. The beautiful thing about this is whatever that was, whatever it might be, mistakes, fears, worries, insecurities, status, whatever it could be, fear of what will happen if I do. As we see with Nicodemus, it might have affected how Nicodemus approached Jesus, but it never affected how Jesus approached Nicodemus. It didn't matter. And the same is true for us. We might feel that the things we're carrying, the baggage, the weight, the responsibilities, all that kind of stuff, we might feel that affects how we approach Jesus, or if we can approach Jesus. But it doesn't in any way, shape or form affect how Jesus approaches us. Jesus met with Nicodemus happily because he valued meeting Nicodemus, because he valued Nicodemus. He wanted a relationship and connection with Nicodemus. In the same way, he wants relationship and deeper relationship and connection with us. So those things that might keep us distant, don't keep him distant. And part of what I want to encourage us this morning is to just go, okay, those things they don't affect his perception of us at all. He meets us in the dead of night, that's what we need. He meets us in our lowest moment, our highest moment, whatever we need, he meets us in those spaces. And the really beautiful thing about it is when he meets us, for Nicodemus the challenge was, how am I going to be perceived by those who view me in my position, the Jewish counselor, in this high profile position? How am I going to be perceived if I'm seen meeting with Jesus? So he meets him in the dead of night. But then if we follow the journey of Nicodemus through the rest of the Bible narrative, we see a change in him. And I believe that change is because he met with Jesus. So if we just go, I'm going to skip 2 slides actually, just not that one, but the next one. This is 4 chapters on in the book of John, but it's a distance of time into the future, near where Jesus was going to the cross and being tried and stuff. And it says this: Nicodemus, who had gone to see Jesus earlier, just so we remember it's that same person, and who was one of their own number. So talking about the Jewish council, Jesus before the Jewish council here, they're trying him. They're saying that actually he's done these things, he needs to go to the cross and be killed. So this is a tense moment. This is the council that Nicodemus is part of, going, actually, this person, Jesus, has done these terrible things. He needs to be tried, crucified, and made an example of. So this is not kind of like, I wonder what your opinion is. It's like, this is the opinion. And yet Nicodemus says, does our law condemn a man without first hearing him to find out what he's been doing? Now that might not sound particularly helpful for Jesus. That might not sound like, well, that's not him supporting him, but it is. It's Nicodemus going, actually, I need to say something here because I need to do something that stops this happening. Because for Nicodemus, he'd met Jesus and he'd encountered Jesus, and that had changed him. And he'd gone from this man who had met him in the dead of night to now someone who's standing up in the middle of his council asking a question that would not be well received in that council. Because something had changed in him. The fear of being found out had started to leave him, not because he'd become better, or because he'd become braver, or because he'd become something else, but because he'd met Jesus. And that had changed him. And now he's suddenly starting to ask questions that try and protect this one that he's met, that he's encountered. But it gets even more phenomenal after that. And we go to the next bit where we encounter Nicodemus again. This is now, Jesus has been tried, he's been beaten, he's been crucified, and he's on the cross, and they're now going to deal with his body. And we have later Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jewish leaders. So there's this general fear going on around this. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus. So Nicodemus accompanies him. This is not a private thing. This is not, let's sneak it away. This is, they're taking the body. Nicodemus is now aligning himself so much more with Jesus, even in his death. The man who had earlier visited Jesus at night, again, it wants to remind us it's that same man because it's showing us the transformation over time of what's happened to him. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 35 kilograms, taking Jesus' body. The two of them wrapped it with the spices in strips of linen. That was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. That Nicodemus has gone from being scared of what people think of him and meeting Jesus in the dead of night, to then going in the middle of a high pressure Jewish council going, but can we really send him to the cross without doing a trial of him? i.e. trying to protect him, knowing that Jesus did nothing wrong, to then actually being there the one who goes with Joseph of Arimathea, going, actually we're going to take care of his body, we're going to look after him. All of that changed, not because Nicodemus just became a better person, but because he'd encountered Jesus and it changed something on the inside of him. And that's why the biggest lie is, I can't come to Jesus because of this. I can't come to Jesus because of my past, because of my status, because of this insecurity, this fear. But actually that's the biggest lie, because when we come to Jesus with that stuff, we suddenly find eventually that stuff starts to drift off. Not because we try, but because he changes us when we encounter him. So the fear of I can't do it because of is the very reason why we need to. The very reason why he encounters in the first place. Nicodemus came to Jesus in his fear, and suddenly that fear over time just disappeared. And he's now doing this public act of protecting and looking after the Jesus that he fell in love with. The Jesus that he followed. So, next one for me, please, Darren, thank you. I'm going to finish with this, because I will keep talking unless I... not only does Jesus want to encounter us, but Jesus is interested in hearing us. And not hearing us with those easy questions, but hearing us with those difficult questions, those hard questions, the things we don't understand. And I'm not going to read through the whole of this right now, but I think we see in the first bit of Nicodemus' life that he's scared to come and see Jesus, but he's got questions he wants answered. And he thinks this guy Jesus has got those answers. And so we just see in the next slide, and we see he comes and he asks him lots of questions. How can someone be born when they're old? He's asking him questions. He's curious. He wants to know things that are burning in him. He's like, I don't get this, Jesus. I don't understand how this can happen. I don't understand how this situation is like this. I don't understand what he's saying about that, because he wants answers. Or the next bit, the next slide for us, he kind of then talks about, Jesus starts to talk about, how can this be? How can what you just said be the case, Jesus? How is that possible? And I raise that because I think Jesus wants to meet with us with all our garbage, with all our junk, with all the things that we think disqualify us. He is desperate to meet with us. But secondly, he also wants to hear from us. He wants us to bring him those unbelievably difficult and hard questions. The ones that even Darren can't answer. Those kind of questions, okay?
A lot of those.
Those kind of questions. Those ones that might be just wonderings of, I don't understand this about you, Jesus, or they might be painful. Why did that person die? Why does that situation happen? He is not intimidated by those questions. He's not intimidated by us asking those hard questions. He's not saying, actually, you can come to me, but you're not asking that. Or you can come to me, but I'm not going to give you an answer. I'm just going to leave you wondering. He wants us to bring our questions. And in the case of Nicodemus, Jesus answered those questions. He brought responses to those questions. He helped Nicodemus to understand. And I think, again, for us in this room, it's being honest with our junk and stuff that keeps us back from coming to Jesus. But then when we come to Jesus, being honest with our questions. Jesus, I don't get this. I don't understand this. I don't know why this is. How can that be, Jesus? And not thinking that's a sign of disrespect. That's a sign of the ultimate respect. Saying, actually, Jesus, this question, I don't know where else to go with it other than you. That's what Nicodemus did. It's like, I can't go. I'm in the Jewish high council. That is like the elite. That should be the people that have the answers. But Nicodemus is going, I can't get an answer there. Jesus, you're the only one I can come to ask this question. And Jesus even refers to it. He says, you are Israel's teacher. Do you not understand these things? He's pointing to the fact that I know you don't know it, Nicodemus, and actually you're doing the right thing by coming to me, because I do know the answer to this. So, last little thing before we finish up. How you do this is how you do this is entirely up to me. That's not meant to be crossed through. It's just a formatting error. You could write them in your phone. You could just think them in your head. But I want to just take a moment, just think, what questions do we have for Jesus? What are those things that sit perhaps buried in our hearts, in our minds, that we go, actually, I've not asked that. I don't want to ask that. Maybe some of them are scary. I don't want to ask that question because I'm not sure I want to know the answer. But what are those questions? What are the things we want to know? Because in asking that, we encounter Jesus even more. In Nicodemus asking his questions, he encountered Jesus even more. And he encountered him in such a way that it transformed him and it changed him. So again, we're going to take 2 minutes, and you can think about them. You can write them in your phone. You can just, whatever. But just 2 minutes, think about what are the questions that I would like answers to. What are the questions I want to ask Jesus? Just take a minute or two and we'll do that now. Obviously, you can bring all those questions to Darren later if you want to as well. That's absolutely fine. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer.
Going out at 12, so get going.
But some of those questions you might want to. You might want to say, actually, I do want to talk to people about that, and that's absolutely fine. Some of those questions might be so deeply personal, that actually it's just between you and Jesus. That's where it exists. That's where it stays. But it's knowing that actually our questions lead us to even deeper encounter with Jesus. And even beyond that, the amazing thing about the questions that Nicodemus asked, the amazing thing about the kind of encounter that Nicodemus had with Jesus, is it transformed Nicodemus, and it meant that he met Jesus in a whole new way, and he had this whole depth of encounter, and he became this kind of character that just keeps repeating through the key moments of Jesus' life. And the same is true for us, that it changes us. But the other phenomenal thing is the verse that comes after Nicodemus' interaction with Jesus. And Jesus has had this interaction with Nicodemus, and then he says perhaps one of the most well-known and profound verses in the whole of the Bible, and this comes after his conversation with Nicodemus, and it's this one just here that we all know. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned. Whoever does not believe in him stands condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. But that is probably one of the most famous verses, the most famous passages of Scripture that's known in and outside of churches, in and outside of Christian context. And that came after Nicodemus' encounter and questions with Jesus. My point is, as we come to Jesus and encounter him, as we ask those hard questions, not only does it change us, not only do we encounter Jesus, but actually something can be birthed, something can happen on the other side of that can be something that ripples and affects other people too. Our family, our friends, our neighbourhood, our community, our city and beyond. Just because we dared to come and just because we dared to ask, it can lead to phenomenal things beyond us, beyond what we're experiencing. So my encouragement as we finish today is to take away those moments of like, what is it, Jesus, that stops me from coming? I'm going to put that to the side, I'm going to come to you. What is it, Jesus, the questions I have, I'm going to ask you those questions, because in asking them, I encounter you in a whole new way. I'm just going to pray before we close. Jesus, just thank you. Thank you that you are interested and invested in meeting with and encountering every single person in this room. You care about all of us beyond anything we can possibly conceive or imagine. You are so deeply invested into us. I just pray that each one of us would have the bravery to step into a deeper encounter with you, to step and come and meet you again, to step and come and just know you more, to ask those questions that we've had hidden in our hearts, to talk freely and openly with you, that we might be transformed, but also that our communities and our society and our city and all that kind of stuff, families, might be transformed too. In Jesus' name, amen.